Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here at Sunnyside today again. Today is insect and disease class, which doesn't sound very fun, but we'll try to make it a little bit entertaining today. So say hi to Nicole. She's back in the background there.
Good morning.
Mr. Smith is in the house again. The whistling gardener is going to be typing frantically, answering some questions during class. Try to stump them. It's always fun with bugs and diseases. You'll probably stump one of us today. So keep him typing and keep him on his toes in there. This is a really hard class, I'll be honest, to do verbally. This is you would call or you would email the store and immediately I would say, great, could you bring a sample down? Could you bring a leaf? Could you bring, something for us to physically look at? That's always going to be the best way to get a proper diagnosis. Nothing's worse than sending you home with the wrong product for the wrong problem. Maybe it's not even a disease or insect, but it's something cultural, watering, too dry, too wet, fertilizer, too much fertilizer. There's so many things in the garden, so many variables. It's always good to get the proper diagnosis. So try to bring down a sample, number one. Number two would be take pictures and try the email thing. And if we can, but if you're going to take pictures, attach it on an email so we can take the picture, blow it up, look at it closer. Hopefully it's not blurry. And again, especially with disease, try to get not just a picture of the plant, but a close-up of the foliage on the bottom and perhaps the top. A lot of things you'll see in the slides I'll show you today. You may look at the top of the leaf, nothing looks wrong at all, but underneath we've got some issues. So try to kind of keep those things all in mind. Again, like I said, getting the proper diagnosis is really important to me, to us as a company. We don't want you to waste your money and buy something you don't need. And a lot of times, you'll hear me probably say murder, death, kill a few times a day. Sometimes we don't need to get murder, death, kill. We can get something kind of a little easier on the garden, easier on the environment to take care of the problems well. Certainly, there are going to be some things that we got to, whip out the big guns for and take care of. So organic and natural is really a good way to go. There's a lot of options that we'll talk about, but there's a few things still that we probably got to rely on, old murder, death, kill systemics to maybe get rid of it a little quicker. So keep in mind, as we talk about things, I'll show you products. We'll go fast and furious, but keep that in mind. You can make your own choice. Do we go systemic? Do we go something that's chemical, non-systemic, or something natural, organic? The one thing I would say with that is we would never use the systemic anywhere near edible, vegetable, berry, fruit, any of that we would eat. So keep that in mind, kind of as you're thinking about different maybe issues in your own garden. All right. We'll start, we'll go through the handout here, talk about some general things. I'm kind of always a preventative guy myself, and I would rather maybe teach you a few things that maybe you can get into practice in your own garden that may keep you from getting these problems in the first place. Nothing is ever immune to anything. We're not going to go down that road, but is maybe you keep a few things in mind as you're pruning and weeding and doing these things here in spring and all through the year that may help you have less disease, less insects as we go forward. Okay. So hopefully everybody got the handout. If we didn't, I sent a few to people from the lawn class yesterday, this morning. But there's a handout there that will hopefully give you a few things, some light reading, shall we say, that you can take a peek at. There are some suggested products on there. We suggest things. We stick with Bonite. I think it's a great brand for us, a family company back east that does have a wide range of solutions in our pharmacy department. But certainly there's other options out there in the world as well. So we'll kind of focus on obviously the products that we have here at Sunnyside today. Just a reminder, again, this is going to be fast and furious. This is recorded, so we'll talk here for a while. I'm going to show you a few pictures of some common things that I see come in as samples you may have in your yard. We'll have time for questions. Steve will answer during the class as well. But you can go back and watch this later. It is recorded, so you can go back and see a bottle or something maybe you missed during the class, all right? So if we kind of start with the dealing disease half of this, there's fungus among us. Always kind of sounds funny, but it makes me smile when I read that every time. So diseases are always a big thing, for us in Western Washington with our weather pattern. We did get a little chillier this winter, but typically our very maritime, mild climate, wet springs is going to lead to maybe a little bit more disease-prone plants around here. So kind of keep that in mind, as you're making your choices. I worry more myself in my own yard about disease than I do perhaps insect. I think insects are things that we can keep an eye on and monitor and take care of fairly easily with most of them. Diseases, we don't want to let them get a foothold. If I'm a fungus, I'm a little spore and you can't see me and I'm blowing all over the place. So today's windy. We're going to be raining this afternoon. It's blowing in everybody's wind, air, rain everywhere. And so, when I have a chance to land on a leaf I like, that's when I can reproduce myself. So if I have wet leaves, windy weather, it's going to blow in. I get on the leaf of whatever plant it is. If I'm wet there for 3-4 hours, I have a chance to get myself propagated, attached, and start to colonize. Now we end up with the disease. So, dry foliage is always best. That's going to be one of the things we're talking about, but just keep that in mind. You can do all you can do about disease and keep up on dormant spraying and all the things we'll discuss. But maybe perhaps if your neighbor, Mrs. Jones next door, does not, her problem is going to blow through the wind and the rain and perhaps get on a similar plant in your yard. So there's something to kind of keep in mind. Don't go confront the neighbor about this. That's not what it's about. But just keep that in mind as you're looking at, I sprayed that a few times. Why did I still get it? Look across the fence, and sometimes that's where it would come from as well, okay? So a couple things just as general cleanup tips you'll see on there, debris cleanup. If I have a diseased plant, I am not leaving the foliage on there in the wintertime. So this goes back to even last fall, whether it's a rose, whether it's a fruit tree, whether it's anything. If I had a problem with it, let's let it go dormant, shed its foliage. I want all that cleaned up. I do not want it festering as mulch. I don't want it blowing back on the next spring. So a good rake job, if you have not done it yet, on those plants that are A, prone to problems, or B, that you had an issue with last year. Let's get all those leaves out of there, off the ground, and get rid of them. That would be a great way to start. Good pruning is always a thing with disease to me. Air circulation and sunshine mean everything. We talked about wet foliage, trying to dry things off. We can't all of a sudden flick the switch and make it sunny every day. I wish we could, and dry our leaves off every morning. But if we prune properly, we're going to have better air circulation, going to have drier foliage, better sun exposure. And again, that means a little bit less disease naturally as well, okay? Right plant, right place. I'll admit, I'll raise both my hands. We always try to cheat Mother Nature and beat the experts and say, oh, I can grow that anywhere I want in my yard. Yeah, maybe with some things you can, but using the rose as an example, if I plant a rose in shade, I'm going to fight mildew, black spot, and foliage diseases. Out in the sun, I've got a much better chance, again, of keeping those plants clean. So right plant in the right place is huge. Drainage is another big one. With our wet springs, we want to have proper drainage. To me, some of the hardest to take care of, or honestly incurable diseases, are going to come from the root system. So if I have hard pan clay, wet soil, overwatering, bad drainage, however you want to say it, that's going to give me issues with a lot of plants. That is not just a couple, but a lot of things that we grow around here, from rhodies and azaleas to different shrubs to really anything, is going to be very prone to root rots, or again, root system diseases that will cause our plants to crash. Like I mentioned, there's not a lot we're going to be able to do about that, about those situations. So that's something, watch where you're planting things originally, get that right plant in the right place again. For me, I'm hoping you care about your yard because you're tuning into my boring talk again today, and that you go out and look at your yard. We're getting into spring, there's bulbs blooming, things are breaking bud here pretty quick. You should be out enjoying your yard at least once a week. And when you're walking around, notice things. If you can catch this stuff early, get the proper spray on it, then you will stay ahead and you will win. If I don't do anything about anything in my yard until we get into June, now that whatever issue it is has got a foothold and it's going to be much, much harder to get rid of. Okay, so watch the yard, kind of watch the weather. Who knows up here, we always rainy in the spring. Some years not as bad, and the wetter it is and the longer the rain persists, is the longer I'm going to personally try to monitor my foliage in the different gardens at my house and try to keep things clean and stay ahead of it again, okay? Spraying at the proper time, is huge. And I would put on with that, learn how to spray properly. When I'm applying a fungicide, we'll do the same thing with insecticides here in a minute. I want to get it on at the right time. Some things aren't going to matter if I don't time my spraying right. So again, foliage is emerging here fairly quickly. If I put a dormant spray on already to keep my plant or start it clean, it's going to do me no good right now to walk out and do it again and again and again. Let's let that plant leaf out, get its foliage. Now we can go back and spray again to hopefully protect it for the next cycle, okay? And learning how to spray properly. I mean, when you spray something, you know, whether we're talking natural, organics, anything, you know, we want to do it the right way, you know, pick the right time of day, not when it's windy. Be real careful what we're next to, depending on the spray you choose, and get it completely covered. You know, walking around and doing a quick little blessing on the top is not going to fix the problem. We got to make sure we get that plant sprayed inside and out, and particularly the foliage. You know, I want to get it wet and underneath. So sometimes it's kind of getting up in the middle and getting it sprayed. On the, you know, the other side of that is, you know, don't overuse these products. You don't have to put gallons and gallons of a chemical on something to fix it. We want to just wet everything down. If you're spraying and you're seeing it drip and run off leaves, shut it off. That's too much. You know, we just want to get it wet, and coverage is important, but we don't want to overspray on the converse side as well. Okay. You know, a couple things I put on there, especially with disease, you know, make sure you sterilize your pruners. If you come to an expert here at Sunnyside, you've got a diagnosis for a twig blight or pseudomonas or whatever the problem is on a tree or shrub, you know, and you've been pruning that thing, make sure you sterilize your pruners before you go and attack another plant. That's a really easy way for some of those harder pathogens that are in the tissue to go from plant to plant to plant around our yard. Is simply pruning cuts. So make sure we sterilize those pruners. If you want to be safe, you know, do it between plants when you're out pruning. It's very easy to grab a little, you know, swab of rubbing alcohol or sterilize your pruners and then move right back on to the next plant. Okay. You know, one big thing with me, I kind of wrote it half jokingly on there, you feed your children, feed your plants. You know, a fed plant that's properly planted and mulched and great soil is always going to be the most disease resistant plant in your yard. So if we feed our plants right with the right fertilizer on some sort of regular schedule, not 12 times a year, but at least coming out of winter, maybe going into summer at minimum, maybe a third time later in summer, you know, we're going to have more resilient, stronger plants that are not going to have as many issues naturally either. Okay. You know, and again, the last thing I wrote on there, you know, get a diagnosis if you're not sure. You know, nothing drives me crazier, to be honest, you know, than somebody looking at a leaf and going, oh, I know what that is. And, you know, maybe you do, great. You know, I'm glad you're learning and figuring some things out, but I would always check. I mean, I do a lot myself. You know, I'll see something I haven't seen for a while, jump on Mr. Internet, you know, look at some pictures. I don't know, it kind of looks like that. It kind of looks like this. You know, or I might ask a colleague, hey, have you ever had this going on with your raspberry or whatever the plant is? And we can get, again, a good diagnosis so that we do the right thing, get the right product to take care of it, and we have success going long term. Because ultimately, that's what I want. That's what we want here at Sunnyside. You know, we want you guys to have success going long term. We don't need any black thumbs. Everybody's got a green thumb somewhere down there. And if we can teach you some basic things, hopefully you'll be a little more successful. Okay. Now I'll let you read through. We're going to show some pictures here in a little bit. But what I've done, you know, kind of with that disease portion of the outline is, you know, pick a few major categories and maybe some things that again, I see folks ask about a lot, or people bring in samples of, or send pictures of a lot, and some suggested maybe things to take care of them. You know, so if we look at turf, you know, we kind of did a grass class yesterday, so we won't spend a lot of time on that, you know, but honestly, on the disease side of it, coming out of winter, perhaps we do have some thatch issues and we have to go to a product that will take care of some of that. You know, Infuse is a systemic granule that we can broadcast spread on there if you go the chemical route. If you want to stay natural, there's some great things like Revitalize is a great biofungicide that if you keep up on it, will do the job at keeping things like red thread and brown and molds and all different things in your yard in check as well. Okay. One thing kind of different on there would be mushrooms. And, you know, as we start to kind of warm up in spring, a lot of people ask about mushrooms, whether it's in the landscape or the yard. You know, mushrooms are always a sign, honestly, that you've got healthy soil, typical wheat, you know, wood decomposition down there somewhere. A lot of times it's an old stump. It's a, you know, it's an old root system. If you have a mushroom area, particularly in the turf, you know, get a product like Consan 20. You'll see that listed on there. If I go spray my mushrooms or toadstools here as they come up, they won't have a chance to go to spore, and I won't continue to get those rings of the mushrooms going in the lawn in particular. Okay. Roses are always one, that we kind of start out early here. Roses a lot of times won't even lose their foliage in the wintertime, but we want to make sure we strip them coming out of winter. And as these new leaves come out, we immediately get on top of it. I don't want to pick on roses. I love roses myself. We had rose class a couple weeks ago, but that to me would be the poster child for the example of, if I don't keep up on spraying on a rose and I want to grow a Mr. Lincoln rose in my yard and have it look really good, I've got to stay ahead on the spraying. I cannot wait till May or June and try to go back and fix a problem. You got black spot, you're probably going to have black spot for the year. Is it going to kill my plant? No, but I think most people want to look out in their yard at a rose garden and look at something that's healthy, glossy. Maybe we live with a little bit of spotting here and there, but certainly not one like I see a lot of samples come in early summer. Like, holy smokes, you got the world record for number of black spots on your plant here at the moment. So again, you'll see on there, whether you want to use a drench, a systemic that we can apply on the root system, whether we spray a systemic on the rose, or we go with something natural and maybe do it a little bit more often, but don't use chemicals. We've got all three of those options here at Sunnyside. Okay. Fruit trees and berries, there's a lot to learn there. We did a couple classes on kind of the fruits and berries in particular already and talked about some of this, but just keep in mind with the edibles again, I don't want something systemic ever. And then you can make your own choice. Do I mind a chemical spray that doesn't penetrate the fruit, the vegetable, the berry, that I will not eat? Okay, if you're comfortable with that, that's your choice. Or again, we've got a bunch of natural type things that if we keep up on spraying maybe a little bit more often, we don't have to go the chemical route with that at all. Okay. Flowering plants, the big one right now, you'll see me listed there as it's again windy and rainy, is blossom blight. I really driving around, do I ever see a plum, a cherry, whether they're ornamental or fruiting, that doesn't have some sort of blossom blight going on it. So if you watch it in your trees this spring, that's a great example of something. If I stay ahead on it, you'll have success. If you walk out there and your little Mount Fuji cherry or whatever kind you have starts to bloom, 2 days later, you walk out and you're like, wow, that was really quick. All the flowers are turning brown. They'll last for a few weeks, not 2 days. So if we have flowers going brown very quickly or leaves that come out and shrivel up from the youngest wood back into the center, you probably have some blossom blight. We can prune a little bit of that out, get some air circulation, get some more sun, and then we can apply a spray and probably halt that. If I don't do anything about something like blossom blight, then you're going to come to me, which some folks will here in a couple months, and say, I had this cherry, 3 branches look great, everything else is dead. Well, if I leave something like that unchecked, I'm going to kill wood, and I'm going to have to do some major pruning to kind of get that back in shape. Okay. So that's just a quick example on that. Dogwood would be a big one with me. I love dogwood trees. I got one in my yard. A lot of folks have dogwoods around, really all over the country, but especially here in the Northwest. There's a lot of choices for dogwood cultivars. And to me, that's a great example of kind of maybe thinking about it before you buy it. So if I have a dogwood, the main issue is anthracnose. Again, another little disease that blows around in the wind and the rain, gets on the leaves. We get the curly tips. Maybe it kills the flower buds if we don't do anything about it. But the dogwood looks like it's struggling a little bit. Is it lethal? Hardly ever lethal. But again, you want your plants to look nice in the yard. That's something that's very easy to spray for. Again, we clean up our leaves. Perhaps we put a dormant spray on that tree here before it goes into spring so that we start clean. And then we monitor it, on some sort of schedule. If I want to keep my dogwood clean, I can go out and probably spray it once a month here in the wet weather after the leaves come out and probably have much better luck keeping it clean. But the reason I probably bring up dogwood in particular, it goes back to that first section, picking the right plant, knowing your yard, where do you have it planted? All those things matter. And there's very disease resistant dogwood choices, which we have a lot of. There's other dogwoods that are going to struggle a little bit more on our wet springs. So picking the right variety, maybe it's not exactly the flower you wanted. You know what? It's not quite as dark pink. It's still pink. It's a little later blooming, but I got a clean tree, and everybody wins kind of thing. Okay. Vegetables and tomatoes. we're just starting to getting vegetables here in the next coming couple of weeks for early crops. No tomatoes or anything yet. It's way too cold for summer things. We'll have our vegetable class coming up. Holly will go through a lot of that with you as well. But again, keeping in mind, we want those natural products for the vegetable garden. I would not go the chemical route, definitely not systemic route. There's very safe and very effective choices to use in the vegetable garden. You'll see, again, a couple suggestions listed there. Our state flower, the rhododendron, there's a bunch of rhodie issues I see around. A lot of people grow rhodies, me included, that we want to watch for. And a lot of times the hard thing with the rhododendron is it's not on the top of the leaf, it's on the bottom of the leaf. So if you've got a rhodie that's really defoliating, maybe is struggled, is off color, food will always help, mulch will always help. But look at the bottom of the foliage, because I think you'll see in the pictures a lot of issues on rhodies are not on top, they're on bottom. And then again, we can diagnose it and solve the problem, okay? So there's just a little bit on diseases. You can read through. Again, maybe you've got a specific plant. You're probably busily asking Steve something right now, or again, send pictures, bring up samples. We can always try to give you a hand doing that too, okay? So we'll do, a quick little thing, kind of that second half of the handout. I call it insidious insects just because it sounds fun, but, bugs, creatures, whatever you want to call them. This one always kind of makes me smile because these little guys have been here, for literally millions of years. They're going to be here long before we ever were, and they're going to be here long after we're dead and buried, as they say. So bugs are not going to go away. I mean, there's more and more come out and mutate, new strains. The problem with the world, if you ask me these days, is commerce. We get a lot of stuff that doesn't belong here in our climate that will come from a different part of the country. Now we have to figure that out as well. Everybody watches the news has seen plenty of examples of that, in the past years. But again, insects are going to reproduce very fast. They're going to lay eggs. You're going to have larvae, and you're going to get more and more and more. So that's why I said at the beginning, watching your yard, noticing your foliage. Well, that looks a little different. Let me take a little closer look. If we can get these little guys early here in springtime before they reproduce and colonize my entire plant, it's going to be very easy to get rid of them. If I walk away and let every single leaf on my plant get covered with bugs here in a month or two, it's going to be much tougher to get that plant back. Very rarely do bugs kill a plant. They're going to make them look sick, not so sightly, not so well in the landscape. But if we get them sprayed, we can correct the problem, okay? So if we just kind of talk a little bit again about, some of the general, ideas, it's kind of a similar thing with me, debris cleanup. Probably a little bit different than the disease end of it. Again, if I know I had bugs on foliage, yes, I want to get that cleaned up in the fall and get it eradicated out of my yard. But to me, with the bugs in particular, it's probably more about looking at the wood as well. We got a little cold this winter, which was nice. Most years not so cold, and I don't know that we got cold enough to kill off all bugs that would have overwintered, tucked in my little bud scales on my azalea, or hidden in the little bud or the crotch of a branch. If we dormant spray is a great way to start. That would be the poster child, getting something like Monterey horticultural oil, something organic out there before we break into bloom and break bud for spring. That's a great way with oil to coat everything. Branches, crotches, twigs, buds, all of it gets coated with oil. I cut off oxygen exchange between whatever's stuck to my plant and the open air. I'm going to kill whatever's on there, whether it's egg, larva, or a moving insect. So that might be a great way to start, is kind of doing the dormant spray. Right place in the right plant. Again, having a healthy plant that's planted in the right place is always going to help with disease end of it, and as well as insect. Like I mentioned, I would always watch early and often. I mean, especially bugs, because we just don't want to let them get a chance to start reproducing and give us more and more and more kind of thing. Choosing the right spray, and again, I'm not going to jump on the soapbox because I use a lot of organic stuff, the neem oil and on and on. I got a whole bunch of stuff right here. When you start asking questions, I can show you. But it's up to you. Is it systemic the way to go? Maybe with the rose it is. That's your choice. I don't know that I would ever consider it with anything else but a rose myself. That doesn't mean that you can't look at those options. Do I want to get something strictly organic that I might do a little bit more often? Do I want to do something systemic in the root system that I don't have to spray? Or do I want to get something systemic that I would apply on the foliage that would soak in and protect my plant, for 30 days or 6 weeks or whatever it's listed for, okay? Same thing, proper time and how to spray is always huge with both of these things. I would always try to get up, it's not so important this time of year, we're pretty cool, but as a good general rule, I would always try to get up in the morning, fairly early or perhaps late in the evening and get these plants sprayed then when it's not windy. If I get it on there, have a chance for it to dry on, you'll see on every product in the store, rain fast in an hour, just allow to dry on. And who cares if it rains later in the day? This is a tougher time of year to find, that day that isn't going to rain. But those days that do come, you don't need, 24 hours. You need just a few to apply that, let it dry on, then it shields up. I got that product on there properly, and it's going to do its job that way. Okay. Again, think of what happened last season. Did I have a problem? Then consider those dormant sprays. You'll see me on there. I kind of wrote topical versus systemic versus organic. As a quick little explanation, let's say we go something topical. If I find, here's a great, one of our best-selling products called 8. So this has got a terrible name. I don't know, 8 doesn't speak to anybody, but if you look at it, it's a garden and home insect killer. This is chemical, but it's non-systemic. I want to make sure that's clear. I can use this around my house foundation to keep things from coming in. I can spray it on my vegetables, my berries, my fruits, anything in my yard. This takes care of over 100 different insects. So if I want a no-brainer and I'm okay using a chemical-based, non-systemic that won't get into things I'm going to eat, 8's probably a really easy choice to have in your little arsenal in the garage, as an option. That's a great topical thing that I can spray on. I get it right on whatever it is, and I kill it. Now, maybe an aphid, let's use that as an example. I see him on there, I spray. I'm going to immediately go back in 10, 14 days and get it again, and maybe a third time in another 10, 14 days. That way I get the adults, I get the eggs, I get the new, I get the old, and you win. If I do it once, yeah, you know what, you may win on occasion, but I would always play it safe. If you're going to take the time to correct this, let's at least get it on there twice. I would prefer 3 times. Get a quick spray on there and let it do its job. Then we're okay. So there's a topical choice. If I go systemic, it will be something like Rose Shield, something I can spray on, probably not be as worried about covering every single leaf surface, because when I get this on there, that soaks into the plant tissue, translocates throughout all the foliage in the plant, and now I've got shields up from the inside out. So whatever comes down, bug, in this case, bug and disease, I've got protection from all that for a longer period of time. You'll see, again, always read the label, but if I read the label here, it's going to tell me I could do this once every 30 days and have very good luck at repelling all issues of my rose. So there's an example of systemic. Then we get something like organic. If we pull out something easy, one of our best sellers, something like Captain Jack's Super Insecticidal Soap. Very easy to use, no chemical. You'll see in our store, look for these brown labels, little shoulders here, we call them. We got all kinds of products, probably 90% of our store is natural organic, and it's labeled like that with the brown shoulder on the label. So I could scan through and go, ooh, there's something natural, vegetable, rose, whatever it is, and I can find something very easy, or ask the staff to help you find it, kind of thing. So there's an example of something natural. To me, the biggest choice you're going to make as a gardener is probably time, to be honest with you. Do I want to, I'm not going to say lazy, because that's not right, but do you want to do this once a month and kind of walk away and not worry about it? Do you want to do maybe the natural organic way? And yes, I'm going to have to spray that insecticidal soap maybe 2 or 3 times to take care of my problem, versus maybe doing it once with a chemical type solution. Okay. Again, knowing your plants and knowing what they're prone to. We're not going to pick on roses all day, but that's always the easy one, I think, to understand with most gardeners. If I'm going to grow a successful rose, a Mr. Lincoln, a Double Delight, maybe an old school rose that isn't as disease resistant, I know where I live, I know what the weather's like, and I want my plant clean, I'm going to stay ahead of the problem. I'm not going to wait till I get things. I'm going to be proactive and make sure that I get ahead at start with. You know, again, keep in mind the adults versus larvae versus eggs. If you've got a bug, you're going to be getting all three of them at some point. We want to make sure that we get all three life cycles taken care of so that the problem is over and done with. You go out and spray with something natural like insecticidal soap, I get it on those little aphids, I'm going to get all the adults instantly. That's an easy answer. I'm going to get whatever's on there really quickly, but I'm not going to get the larvae perhaps or the eggs. As those continue to mature, that's why we get those sprays down 2 or 3 times, 10, 14 days apart. Then I will win. You know, then you'll get all 3 phases taken care of and the problem's over with for the season. Okay. And again, always get a diagnosis. You know, this is a really hard class to do verbally, but you know, bringing in a picture, a sample, especially with bug, or looking bottom side, top side of the leaf and saying, okay, I don't know what this is, but I found these underneath my rhododendron or whatever. You know, then again, we can get the proper diagnosis and get you the proper solution. Okay. So you'll see on there, we're doing for time here. So you'll see on there, you know, I kind of divide insects into those 4 groups, and maybe it's easier, I think, for some gardeners to think of it that way. Am I don't know if we call them suckers or sucking insects. If I'm one of those, I'm literally extracting sugar or taking my food right out of that foliage. White flies, aphids, there's lots of examples of things. If I walked out and saw my leaves kind of shriveling and contorting a little bit because somebody has taken my juice out of there, that is going to be typically a sucking type insect like that. We have chewing ones, very easy to tell. I got a leaf, I got a big hole in it. What happened? I got a bite mark. Who did this? You know, we can kind of play who did that, you know, figure out which one it was, and then we can get it corrected going that route as well. Clinging type is the hard one to me. You know, these are things like Japanese beetle, viburnum leaf beetle, scales, mealy bugs, probably some of the harder ones to take care of because they're the little evil creatures that are going to hide. You know, they're going to be hiding somewhere down there where you might not even see them, but you're seeing the effect on how the plant is performing. So if I can find a way to get ahead of those clingers, that's the key to me. And that's probably the one, if I had in my yard, war is on. You know, we got to figure out some way to get those out of there, or you may end up having to pitch that plant, dig it out of your yard, and start over again. You know, one example I look at is boar. You know, a lot of people up here are getting familiar with boars, whether it's birch boar. There's a boring insect that gets into a lot of woody trees and shrubs all over the place, but including our little neck of the woods. You know, birch boar has been huge for us. Where I go out my birch tree, I've had it for years. It looks spectacular. And I walk out in the spring and I'm like, what is going on? 2 branches leafed out. The rest of it is dead. If I look at the wood real careful, I'm going to see those holes where that little boar got in, laid their larva, and they're sitting there tunneling in between my bark and my center wood, cutting off circulation, and that will kill my tree. So that's a tougher one. We do have natural things that will combat that if we can get it early, or something again that we can use as a systemic to try to eradicate that as well. But just as an example, that's kind of one maybe a little bit on the tougher side. And then the last one I put in ground. You know, I'm not going to call slugs a bug. Everybody knows that's not a slug, it's a mollusk, but we'll throw those in kind of here too. But if I look at the ground level of my garden, what is going on in the soil? What might attack my root systems? What is crawling up out of the soil when I can't get you at night doing the damage and then going back into hide during daylight hours? All those things are good examples of ground type insects that, again, fairly easy to treat if we know what we're going to go to battle with, and we can get the right product to take care of it as well. Okay. Well, I'm going to show you a couple pictures here, but before, if you were here, I would make everybody say it 5 times. I am going to read the label. I am going to read the label because there is no way any human, including me, is ever going to memorize every single label of every single product at any store these days. So take the time and use it right. The label will tell you everything you need to know. The EPA, the Department of Ecology, all these entities that hopefully help protect us from all kinds of things are going to do, you know, justice and look at it. What does it do? How does it interact? How does it do with the environment? All that information is on there for you. and as well as dilution rates and timing, getting it done. You know, speaking as a guy, if the label tells you to put 2 tablespoons in a gallon of water and apply it, putting 4 tablespoons in a gallon of water is not going to make it twice as effective. Let's not do some math that way. So follow the label, use it properly, and you'll have success. If you take the label off and throw it in the garbage, I'm sorry, but you're probably not going to have as good a luck. You want to make sure you do it the right way, okay? So give me 1 second here. Just going to show you a few pictures to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that I see. So there's me, if you forgot. I actually probably forgot this time. I don't think I said I was Trevor at the beginning, but probably everybody's sick of hearing my name. So there you go. There's me. So if we look real quick to start, you know, we looked at some insects first. We'll kind of go backwards here on the slideshow. But these are a couple types of sucking insects, and I wanted to put these on because, again, I'm looking at the bottom of a leaf. Aphids can come in all different colors. I've seen black, we've seen green, we've seen all kinds of shades, but that is a little soft-bodied creature. If I flip my leaf open on the bottom, I'm going to see them on there here pretty quick. They're getting some spring sugar. They're going to start reproducing, and I'm going to have a whole bunch of them if I don't get it sprayed. I don't need to get systemic or something crazy to kill aphids. You know, you can if it's your choice, but there's a lot of really good natural organic things that will take care of aphids very, very easily. You know, the damage picture, I think, speaks volume. I think that's a little cucumber here a little later in spring, but that's what I'm talking about. If you see those leaves, instead of laying out, they're all twisted, gnarled, and contorted. That little guy's been sucking my sugar out of there, and he's going to cause that leaf distortion like that. So if I walk around my yard and I see an annual, a perennial, a shrub, anything that's got that kind of contorted look, I'm going to stop, look at the bottom. Oh, yeah, there they are. I got them underneath there. Let's get that sprayed and taken care of. You know, we look at white flies. This is one I have a personal battle with at my house a lot of times, to be honest with you, especially coming out of winter here. This year, I think we got cold enough that, yes, I'm not going to see them here as much. But, you know, not being a huge chemical spray guy myself, this is a hard one where a lot of times I'm out shaking things. You know, if I walk by a little plant and I give it a little rustle, you're going to see white flies, little tiny white specks start flying right out of the middle of that thing. I've had it on my boxwood. I get it on my pansies and my window boxes. I've seen it on a lot of plants. And this is a tomato vegetable issue here going into spring later, but you can see the damage. If I don't take care of whitefly, I am not going to have a very pretty plant pretty quick. Those reproduce extremely fast, very easy to take care of. I can get something natural, go boom, 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 3 sprays, 7-10 days apart. I'm going to win, you know, and I'm going to get under and over is going to be the key again, making sure I got good coverage on those. We look at mites. These are evil little guys. They're kind of fun, but really small. You know, that's a hard one that you're probably not going to see ever with the naked eye. A lot of times I'll tell people, get a piece of white paper. You think you might have mites, pick a leaf, get a piece of white paper and just kind of rustle it and fleck it and look at that paper. You're going to see literally specks of dust. And if they're moving, there's your mite. You know, if you see it moving around a little bit, you probably got some mites on there. You know, mites are always going to cause, you know, there's spotted mites, this, that, spider mites. They're all kind of throwing them together for this class. I'm going to look at a leaf and see kind of that, you know, silvery, variegated, you know, kind of webby pattern. When I have a severe infestation, you're going to see it on the leaves. I think it's a hard one to see right at the onset, but you'll see it as they start to reproduce themselves. Mites is one you want to get done with. You do not want to let them get a foothold. And again, I can choose to go something systemic if it's non-edible. If I choose natural products, very effective, neem oil, all kinds of options. As long as I keep up on that and repeat the spray, you will win against the little mites. Then we have some chewing insects. You know, here's a couple things I see around a little bit. Birch, typically we'll get leaf miner up here is a real common problem with birch. You can see from the picture, if I've got a leaf and I just have kind of a weird brown patch on it, like what's that? You know, and you won't see a bug, but if I take that leaf and I kind of peel those 2 tissue layers apart and look inside, you're going to find the little larva of the leaf miner and probably a bunch of his poop, we'll say. We call it frass in the insect world. Sounds better than poop, right? But that's what you're looking at. You're looking at that little guy, got in between there. He's eating himself away. patches out, and off he goes. He's on to the next tree, the next leaf, whatever. Leaf miner's one, if you don't check it pretty quick, that could make your tree look kind of sad for the season. I don't know that it'll ever kill it per se, but certainly something I would keep an eye on. 20 years ago, you had no choice with leaf miner except get a murder, death, kill systemic. Pour it on the roots, spray it on the foliage. It had to soak into the leaf and spray. If you think about the description I made, I've got two, the top and the bottom of the leaf, he's in between there. So I can't put a topical spray on and get to what's in the middle. So now there's some products that are much safer. You can use things like spinosad, Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew is what we have. We've got a number of natural things. If we kept up on them, you would have success against leaf miner without having to go the systemic route. Leaf miner on lilac, exactly the same thing. I got 3 big old lilacs in my backyard I would never get rid of that I inherited from the 50s at my old house. And I would never cut them down. But you know what? I have fought leaf miner once in a while, a few years as an option. So I've lived with it. It doesn't ever kill the tree. But the one thing I do make sure, excuse me, if I had it, I'm going to rake those leaves up in the fall, get rid of them, make sure nothing is stuck up in my lilacs, and I'm going to get a dormant spray on with the horticultural oil that winter to make sure I don't have them going into the next season, and I rarely ever see them 2 years in a row that way. Leaf rollers, a couple chewing insects, where I'm going to see some physical damage. Leaf rollers are always kind of rolled up inside of a foliage. You peel it open, you're like, oh, I see you in there doing your thing. So again, a little bit harder because they're protected themselves by rolling up a foliage, but we got plenty of options for natural things that would help take care of that without having to go, again, the chemical route. Caterpillars to me is a no-brainer. The last 20, 30 years, going back, say, to my childhood, I can remember the gas can coming out, and somebody lighting the tent caterpillar nest on fire was the only way to get rid of it. You had to nuke it with napalm and all the rest. That's just not the case with caterpillar anymore. Very easy to do the natural way. I would never get a chemical to spray any caterpillars, period. If we get something like BT, you find my bottle here. I think I brought it in. Maybe I forgot that one. Darn it. But if we get BT, if you remember that, BT, really easy to remember, that is a natural bacillus bacteria, makes caterpillars sick to their stomach. So if I get BT, totally safe, totally organic, and I spray it on the caterpillar nest or the foliage that has caterpillars running out on them, that's something they eat. That BT makes them sick to their stomach. They don't chew anymore. They die, and I win. That's an easy way to do caterpillars. You'll read cities, counties, park systems where they'll spray on heavy caterpillar ears, and that's what they're spraying on the helicopter. It's not going to hurt anybody, pets, people, kids, all the rest of it, but we will get those caterpillars. I don't know the cycle this year. We'll see pretty early. Usually up here, it's more tick caterpillars are always on this cycle. Most insects, the population goes up, they go away, they come back up. It just never ends. Usually tick caterpillars, 5, 6, 7 years before everybody has them. And then there's nothing, a little less, and then there's nothing for a couple of years, and then wham, they go back up again. Look early. You can see caterpillar nests out in the native areas, the green belts. Maybe you live by one of those, your neighborhood. You can find them pretty early and say, okay, I've seen some caterpillars out this year. Let me make sure I keep an eye on my yard and stay ahead of it that way, okay? Couple clinging ones. I put the boar in here because I think it's a great example of one of those little evil ones that kind of gets where it's a little harder to get him out of there. So you'll see the birch bark. If I look on there, you'll see those dots where the adult came in, laid the larva underneath the bark, and then it sits there in tunnels. You can see all those little ridges and tunnels on the second photo. Very hard to get them out of there. But again, now we have some very easy natural things that I think will work. You don't necessarily have to go to a systemic root pour. One thing, with a non-edible tree, again, non-edible, no fruit trees or anything we're going to eat. One option, a lot of people that don't mind systemic, I would rather have you use something like this than spray. So if I have a birch tree, I want to protect it. I don't want to deal with borers, leaf miners, all the stuff that we talk about. Try using a root pour. This is a tree shrub systemic. Again, nothing edible, but if I mix this in my watering can and I pour it around the trunk of my tree once a year, here February, March, it soaks into the soil, the root system absorbs it, it goes all the way through the plant from top to bottom, and I got shields up. That's a really easy way, non-edible, but something ornamental like that an option for protection. Mealy bugs and scales are a tough one. The mealy bugs, we tend to fight maybe on the houseplant side of things a little bit more, and they're always kind of that white, cottony, soft, fuzzy looking. They're pretty tough to get rid of. So keep up on those really early. Lots of options for those as well. Scales is one that looks like a barnacle or a little limpet. Be stuck to the wood on my plant. They're always scales because they attach themselves for the winter, hang out there nice and insulated. Then the eggs hatch out and they crawl just for a month or two, and then reattach themselves and become scales again. So very easy to kill scale when they're actually crawling and they're not protected by their little shell. We can use a number of different things. But if I have scale on a tree, or I know I did last year, oil is a great way to start to get them off in the winter. Then I can reapply that oil if I want to later in spring, or go to another product that does them as well, and you would win. Japanese beetle, viburnum beetle, those are a couple that have become really prevalent here in our little neck of the woods. I don't see as much Japanese beetle damage, but I know it's taken over a lot. That's another thing that doesn't belong here, that's found a little foothold in North America and is pretty much attacking almost anything. There's a lot of plants that are susceptible to viburnum or to Japanese beetle damage. So watch for that pattern. It's easy to see those kind of shiny, coppery, metallic little bugs if you do find them. Again, lots of options for spray on the natural side as well. I've fought viburnum leaf beetle on my big cranberry viburnum in my yard. A lot of folks have brought in samples. That's probably the #1 bug I've seen people ask about here the last 3, 4, 5 years. They've really started getting into viburnums. Snowball bush, any kind of viburnum period. They're going to skeletonize that plant pretty quick when they hatch out here in spring. So again, when I went home and battled mine 2 years ago, I went straight for the Captain Jacks. The spinosad or spinosad is a great active natural pesticide that makes them sick, and you win. So if you've got those kind of larva chewing type insects like that, consider just getting something simple like Captain Jacks. If you spray it on there when the leaves emerge, we will protect our plant if we can do it a couple of times. In ground, the all-time #1 bug people ask about in our little neck of the woods would be root weevil. Everybody grows rhododendrons. It's rhodies, it's viburnums, it's laurel, all kinds of big, fat, juicy, broadleaf shrubs. If I walk out and I see a bite mark on the outside of the foliage, that is always going to be root weevil, no questions asked. That's a little guy that lives in the ground, crawls up at night, takes his meal, crawls back into the soil before the sun comes up, so you will never see him or her, and you will never catch them or spray them, okay? So this is one we got to get kind of proactive on and get them out of the soil. The best thing on the property, excuse me, is this 8. So this is a granular, it's a shaker, it's not a liquid. This is very cheap. This little 3-pounder does about 1,500 square feet. So if I have old rhodies, up off the ground, and I'm able to get underneath there and shake this out on the soil, this is what you want to do. This is not natural organic, but it's also not systemic. We can use that in the vegetable garden with carrot, wireworm on the other side there. A lot of things in the ground. I think 8 is going to be your best option. If you're like, sorry, Mr. Trevor, I am not going chemical, period, then we got to put in a little bit of work to get the root weevil. You can try, if you've got rhodies or other shrubs with real clean trunk structure, we can kind of put a band, cloth, tape, something around that bark and smear something like Tanglefoot or sticky glue, a biodegradable horticultural glue. We can cover that with that. And if I have total coverage at the base, that little guy's got nowhere to climb up. He's going to get stuck in my goo. And then I get to walk out in the morning and go, there you are. I finally caught a couple of you little suckers, and now I'm going to get rid of you. So you will catch them They're kind of fun actually to look at. Root beetles are pretty cool looking, but that's really the only way you're going to catch them if you want to go strictly organic. Otherwise, we get something like the 8, shake it out on the ground, and then you eliminate the larva, which means I don't have the adult, and then I end up winning. Okay. Crane fly is in the lawn. We talked about this yesterday. You know, if you've got dead patches of lawn, we dig up a square, we look at the soil. If you find that little larva crawling around in there, you got crane fly, and we definitely want to treat it. They will eat all your grass roots here at some point here in the spring. So usually it's a spring and a fall thing up in our neck of the woods. But if you know you've got crane fly, you're not sure, bring a hunk of the lawn soil in and we'll dig apart together, find one, and then get the insect and grub control, a little bag we can sprinkle out on the surface, or honestly 8 works as well too, that we can put on there and get those larvae out of there as well. Then slugs and snails. I mean, I think anybody up here is probably smiling like, yeah, you don't have to talk to me about slugs and snails. I know all about those in the Pacific Northwest. Just keep in mind, you know, the natural options. You know, we do not carry any old metal aldehydes. We're not into poison. I think that's huge issues with pets, with kids, with birds, with wildlife, all the rest of it. So we'll find iron phosphate, natural iron phosphate. People do Sluggo. You know, everybody knows that brand name, Sluggo. We got Sluggo around. We got Sluggo Max, which is exactly the same, all organic, but this has a different attractant. So this would cover like 3 times the amount of square footage. If you want to save a little money, don't dump it. You don't need much of this. But those are 2 great options. Or Bonide, you know, I think might produce the best one of all. This is iron phosphate. You can see on their bug and slug killer. So this also has that spinosyd that we've talked about a little bit. I can apply this, do my slugs, and get some bugs in the ground as well. That may be a little extra boost for you if you want to get kind of two birds with one stone, as they say. Now, real quick, I'm running out of time here, Nicole, sorry. We're going to look at a few disease questions, fast and furious here, and then we'll see how much time you got for questions here. So there's some turf pictures. Again, we talked about this yesterday, but if I eliminate my thatch layer and I perhaps treat, very easy to take care of a lot of these turf issues. Overseed, scratch the dead patches out, and we got our lawn back. If we leave these unchecked and we don't feed our grass organically regularly, I'm going to probably be stuck with red thread well into summer. Mine, I get a little bit in the winter just like everybody, but as soon as I put my lawn food down here early March, it grows right through it and I don't have to worry about treating it. So there's a little bit of turf. There's a couple of roses, the black spot, the mildew. Probably all the gardeners are smiling. Yeah, I got roses and I've seen both of those in my roses. Again, be proactive, get ahead. Don't wait until that picture on the right is ready to bloom in mid-May. And now I'm like, oh, wow, I got mildew over everything. How am I going to get rid of this? We're going to have a much tougher time. If you do procrastinate this out a little bit and you do get black spot mildew, let them bloom the first time and then cut them way back. Get as much foliage as you can off of there. Cut the stems down a little harder to above 5 leaves. Eradicate most of that foliage. Spray what's left. Let them regrow up and start to grow, and then make sure we spray to protect the new growth as it comes up as well. Rust is another rose one. I don't see rust around here quite as much. And I put a virus in here just kind of for interest. You know, if you've got an old rose, most everything now, everything we sell, but I think for a number of years, everything's kind of virus indexed. So you know when you buy a rose, it doesn't have a virus in the tissue system, so you start clean. Typically, virus are transmitted by a sucking insect, aphid, whitefly. They've got it in their body, and they're sitting there putting it in the plant sugar as they move from plant to plant. So it's not to say you could never get it, but you won't get it to start with. And there's no cure for a virus. I don't have a magic answer for that. That's something that plant may live for years with it. It may crash in a season. So that's just something to watch for. A couple fruit things: apple scab, peach leaf curl. You know, we'll kind of throw all these fruit together. Pear blight, you can see with the black on there. Pear rust is very common up here on the foliage. A lot of times folks with cedar trees in particular, blows onto the pear. Cedar isn't affected. The pear shows the disease. So that's something to keep in mind with that. But if we look at all that fruit, you know, again, a dormant spray will help you. This is probably one of our best selling things on the property because everybody's growing their own. This is a bonide product, again, natural. We can see the brown label, but this is our citrus, fruit, and nut orchard spray. So this is a great combo spray that does bug and disease. I can hook this on my hose, walk out, do my tree, put it in the garage, bring it out a month later, do it again if I need to. But this would really be a good option for a lot of those home orchards that you want to take care of a broad range of these fruit issues and some bugs as well. The one thing we passed is the peach. And if you've got peach, apricot, nectarine, anything like that, and we're going to fight disease, it's all about copper. Just remember, liquid copper fungicide, anything copper is going to be the natural way to go to keep those specific issues at bay. We look at berries, you know, blueberries, mummy berries, some people come in and complain about. That's a really tough one to get rid of. It's about debris cleanup. It's about pruning, air circulation, a lot of things we talked about on the cultural side. To start with, if I have mummy berries, sometimes I'm going to prune out anything that shows any signs of it and keep my fingers crossed that it survives. Sometimes mummy berry causes crash of blueberry. If I'm going to spray for it, there's really only one thing I've still seen to this day that does anything, and that's the funginil. Used to be called daconil back in the day, but that's a chemical fungicide. It's not systemic. It's safe to use on berries. They'll give you right on there a kind of a harvest date. If you use it now, you're safe to eat your berries in a week, you know, kind of thing. But that's about the only thing that you'll find that would help prevent or help cure a mummy berry problem. Raspberries, it's always about the root system to me. Bad drainage, bad raspberry patches. So whether we talk root rot, anthracnose, I mean, I can go on and on with raspberry problems. To me, it always goes back to the soil and air circulation. Have I pruned my patch out, gotten rid of old gnarly wood, opened it up so I get sun and air, and do I have adequate drainage? If you've got hard packed clay, wet in the winter, you're going to struggle growing brambles, raspberries, blackberries, all this stuff. If we raised it up or we have excellent drainage and we prune properly, you will not. There's a picture of the blossom blight we talked about earlier. I won't talk about it again, but that's a great picture, I think. Leaves have come out, flowers have already turned brown. That's not after a week or two, that's like the next day. The infection's gotten into the bloom, caused it to shrivel. If I don't prune that out and spray, I'm going to end up killing that branch, and it's going to work its way back into the tree system as the seasons go on. Anthracnose, same thing. We talked about dogwoods earlier. That's a great picture to kind of show you the tip of the leaf curling. And again, if I don't do anything about that, it gets into the young wood and it probably knocks out my flower buds. I don't want to speak for you, but the reason I have my dogwood is I want some monster flowers in May and June. So if I leave anthracnose unchecked, I'm probably going to knock my flower or greatly reduce my flower count out for the season. You know, a couple vegetable things. We're not quite into either of these yet. Don't call and ask for tomatoes today. We're not doing tomatoes yet. But all these vegetable problems, again, something natural, something safe. Got one here. This is a great little go-to spray by Bonide, again, natural with the brown. This is sulfur and pyrethrin, two totally natural products that will do my bug and help me with disease as well. Again, a great little combo spray to kind of get both with one. You know, you'll see blight on tomatoes. The best thing I tell you is don't put them out too early. Everybody puts tomatoes outside too early. And then what do you get? Blight, because it's too wet and it's too cold at night. So put it off as long as you can or protect them. We've got some other ways we can kind of help you protect them too if we do them early. Zucchini, cucumber, kind of anything in that cubrit side of the vegetables, you're probably going to fight mildew at some point. And again, is it in the world? No. You know, does it get on my vegetables? Hardly ever. No. You know, but if I want a clean looking zucchini plant in the summertime, because they're kind of cool looking when they get big, I've got to watch that mildew early and often so that I don't get those problems down the road. Okay. Roadies, I'm going way over the goal, sorry. We're almost done, I promise. The roadies here, you know, this is kind of our state plant, and I put these on intentionally because on the right, you'll see fungal leaf spot. Now that's from the top. I can see black, I can see where the damage is, and I can correct that. The other side there is rhododendron mildew, which I see a lot more commonly when people bring in samples, and you can see the top and the bottom. If I turn my rhodie leaf over and I see kind of those grayish, tannish colored patches on there, I've probably got rhododendron mildew. It's going to cause a lot of defoliation. All that's going to be left is the top shell of my rhodie from last year. If I don't do anything about it, that set gets it this year, and then I go up again. So if I have tall, old, leggy rhodies with all those leaves dropping in the summer more than they should, I probably got a problem with rhododendron mildew. We can spray for that with a number of different things as well. Just ask. Sooty mold, camellias. I get this on one of my camellias a little bit in the backyard. You know, that honestly is kind of a twofold problem. If I have that black kind of sooty mold, I could take my finger and I could scrape it off the leaf, to be honest with you. It's a black mold, but the reason it's on there is it's growing on sugar. So if I have sooty mold, I have an insect problem. Hence, they left me sugar. Now I got a fungus problem growing on the sugar. So it's kind of a twofold issue. If you've got sooty mold, correct the insect problem first, okay? Get rid of whatever's in there. Is it scale? Is it aphids? Is it anything? Then we can attack the sooty mold part of it. The sooty mold is not going to kill your plant, but if you walk away, you're going to end up with a black camellia from the inside out with a little bit of nice green on the outside, and all those leaves are going to drop because they've been affected by it. Leaf gall is the other one for me. You know, I see it on a couple of my azaleas from time to time. Some varieties are a little more prone than others. Usually the corally, salmony, orangey flowering ones for some reason tend to get it a little bit more. It's not the end of the world. It's not the plague. It looks absolutely disgusting when you get that kind of gall ball on the tip of your branch. But if I simply prune that off, pitch it in the yard waste, and perhaps spray with a little copper, it's over with. If I don't do anything about it, and I let my whole plant get covered with leaf gall, then I'm probably going to have a little tougher time getting rid of it, okay? Conifers, you know, I just put a couple on there to watch for. You know, conifers are tough because we go through this cycle. The old growth is always going to shed in a conifer in the summer. It doesn't mean that you've got a disease. It doesn't mean there's a problem. There's that natural process we call flagging, where the old growth that's 3 years old is always going to drop out in the dry summer, turn into mulch. We rake it up, whatever your thing is. It doesn't mean there's a disease. I would look really close. The tips, are they having problems when they grow out here in spring? We might have tip blight on spruce or pine or something else. Or do we have something like needle cast? If I look at some of those needles that have dropped, not just like, ooh, they look brown, great mulch. Look at the needle and see if they're spotting or banding on it. Then again, perhaps we've got to look at the rest of the tree and go, whoa, I've got rust, I've got needle cast, whatever it is, and get that tree sprayed. A lot of times with conifers, to me, it's the fall we would want to watch the spray for a little bit, and maybe again coming out of winter. Maples, you know, I only got like 2 left here. I'm almost done. We got like Japanese maples here. You know, 2 big things with me, and this probably goes back to drainage a little bit. Verticillium wilt is brutal. You know, verticillium wilt is something that is in my soil, your soil, Nicole's soil, and even Steve's soil, I bet, at his new house. It's in all the groundwater. Verticillium wilt's everywhere. It doesn't attack plants until the water table comes up in the winter and we have drainage issues. Maple is the poster child. You know, if you've got maples that grew and grew and grew and then all of a sudden crashed in the spring, leafed out, looked like you lit a match to them, or maybe 2 branches leafed out, 1 does not, I can almost guarantee you got verticillium wilt. There's no cure. I don't have a magic answer for you. There's nothing you can do except not plant that tree back in the same place again, or really dig that area out and improve the drainage. I put the picture on there of the cross cut of that branch. Verticillium wilt, the only way you're going to be able to tell, or I'm going to be able to tell you if you have it, is if we look at, say, an inch or 2 branch, we pruned it off, we're going to see that dark brown or black bullseye, kind of that pattern in the middle of the wood. That's going to let you know, okay, I had verticillium traveling through my plant. I got to get rid of this thing. Sterilize your pruners. Do not touch another maple with those pruners after you prune, or your saw. Sterilize them, and then we move on. There's plenty of plants that are verticillium resistant. Plenty of them are immune. Other ones very susceptible. I won't ever quit growing Japanese maples, but they would be at the top of the susceptibility list. So be real careful with drainage. That's how we get problems with that. Pseudomonas is always going to give me black wood. It's really easy to see. Coral bark maple is probably the most common one. Everybody loves coral bark maples. It would also be the one that's most susceptible to Pseudomonas. I have one in my yard. I will walk out every single year this time of year and look closely at the wood. Do I have any black on the tips? Do I have black on a trunk? You know, copper will help Pseudomonas a little bit. I got to keep it from getting to the trunk. That's the hard part. It typically is going to be up in the younger wood that I can maybe prune out of there and be done with it. I prune, I apply the copper spray, I keep my fingers crossed, and we move on, okay? Now, the last one here, I promise, Nicole, is just an example of what we talked about at the beginning. You know, if you looked at this as a gardener, be honest with yourself. If I didn't put captions on these pictures and just showed you that picture, you would go, what is wrong with that plant? I'm fighting disease. I got an issue, whatever it is. And I put these on intentionally to say it's not always a disease or an insect. It's cultural, it's fertilizer, iron. There's so many other variables in our gardens. Get a diagnosis, because why waste your money buying any of these things sitting in front of me? If I could have just got a bag of fertilizer, thrown it on my roadie, boom, I'm back to health. I've got green leaves and everybody's happy kind of thing, okay? Sunburn, overwatering, the last two common ones there. You know, you might look at some of that and think, okay, I got a problem, but think of the pattern. Was the weather hot? Is it in sun? Did I water enough? I mean, there's an easy way to correct those with something cultural versus having to treat, again, for a bug or disease, okay? There we go. I'm gonna stop the share. Sorry, that was an hour and 6 minutes. This is a tough class to do pretty quick. So I'm hoping Steve got a bunch of questions done. I can certainly stay. I'm here today. I'm here this week. You can come bring samples up or ask me anything you'd like. But real quick, all the pharmacies on 20%. So I showed you a little fraction of some options here, whether it's systemic or topical or natural things. We do a lot of natural stuff here. Obviously, all that's 20% off. So, I mean, if you need some stuff for your yard, fill up the stash in the garage. It's a great week to come shop. Get 20% off everything on the property in our pharmacy department, all the way starting today through Friday. That includes the slug control stuff. That's a popular purchase when we have slug issues. Getting that sluggo for a great price is an awesome way to go. I'll be back in 2 weeks doing 2 more classes if you're not bored of listening to me yet. So the 12th of September, Saturday at 10, we're doing conifers. It'll be a fun show, kind of talking about colors and textures and different conifers, dwarf and large. Sunday is the new for 22 class. It's got a nice ring to it this year. So new for 22 is on Sunday at 11, and I'll be showing again. We don't have a lot of the plants in yet, but you'll kind of get a little, kind of whet your appetite for the coming season, where all the new perennials, annual shrubs, trees, some of it's in, yes, other stuff will come later, but kind of show you kind of the stuff we're excited about stocking here at Sunnyside for the first time as well, okay? So we got some questions, Nicole.
Okay, let me just start by saying, wow. Like, I don't know about anybody else, but my brain has exploded with information. It's incredible how much you have stored in your brain. I mean, I know probably me and everybody, I know everybody else sitting here trying to absorb all of this, and you catch bits and pieces of it, and then it just keeps going. I mean, it makes sense why this class lasts so long, and there are so many questions because there's just so much information. So where do you even begin? You know, for me, that's new to this, and you know, you're trying to take in all of these bits of information for diseases and bugs, but like, where do I even start? What if I have stuff on all my plants? What do I do?
It'd be like, there's a few customers, the smart ones, I would say there'll be 10 or 12 here in the next week or two that'll bring down a shopping bag that'll have like probably 20 Ziplocs in it, and they'll have leaves of all the different things they're wondering about in your yard. And that's absolutely fine. Bring them down, because I think that's a good learning lesson. A lot of times I'll grab a couple new staff members and say, hey, come and listen to this for a minute, because we can go through, no, that's disease, this is insect, need some food on that one, wrong place, cold winter, you know, that's going to be a huge one this year with the cold temperatures we got. Is it just winter damage? Feel free to bring down as much as you like. I mean, we're here to help. You know, look at samples is my favorite. Pictures, sometimes we can do it, but sometimes you may get an email back says, all right, I tried. Frankly, your camera sucks. I can't blow it up. It's too blurry and I can't see anything. So sample is always going to be the best way. If you live around here, stop down anytime. It's not just me. We've got a lot of good staff that can help you get a good diagnosis.
Also, I'm not gonna lie.
Well, the other thing I'd say with that is, this is a class bug and disease. You could look at the class schedule for the entire year, and there's some great ones coming up all through the coming, 8-9 months. Every class that gets touched on at some point. Lawn yesterday, we talked about the specific things that go with it. And we're going to do this in the vegetable class, in the roadie class, in all the specific topics. If you want to learn more in depth about root weevil, we're going to spend a little more time talking about it at the roadie class because it's a roadie specific thing around here for the most part.
I was going to say, I really enjoy when it's like stump the experts games, when people bring things down and, all the experts around here are like, well, I've never seen that. What is that? It's always a fun game.
And again, Steve would probably say the same thing on the, typing in there. We're happy to admit defeat. I get stumped a few times every year. It's really cool. It's a part of the job I love about my job is bring me something I haven't seen before. I'd like to learn too, so I'll spend some time looking on, hey, I'll get back to you. See anything like this before. We do some research. I might be able to figure out, I may not to. Wow, I can't believe, might be this, might be that. One thing I would say, the internet sometimes is not always right. I think everybody would admit that. But if you're looking up information on this topic specifically, bug, disease, crops, all the stuff we've talked about, find a university, an extension office, or something reputable. Don't go on and listen to the garden gal, who's going to tell you how to fix all the problems in your vegetable garden. Look at Michigan State, Oregon State, Washington State. I mean, the Northwest, Washington State and Oregon State are two of the top ag schools in the country. And if I'm, especially the edible, the vegetable, fruit, berry, and all ornamentals, great information on their website. I mean, a really easy way to find out, not from the garden gal, but from a professor who's got a doctorate, on how to take care of wireworm and carrots. There's a bunch of great examples like that.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the idea about just, bring a sample of what you got and start with what's going on and how do we
shopping
solve
bags
that.
full. Yeah.
Yeah, even that is intimidating and daunting. So like one thing at a time, right? Baby steps make a big difference. So, and you start chipping away at all that. There were a few products you mentioned a few times, like Captain Jack's and 8, things like that, that can work for a few different type issues to kind of scale down the overwhelmingness of this. Is that, depends on what you got.
Well, and again, that's a great point, man. I tried to bring it up with 8. There's a few things that we carry. I don't mind using chemical, again, non-systemic. This is totally safe for vegetable, berry, everything in the yard. I think 8, if you don't mind a mild chemical on there, that is the go-to for most gardeners. If I have that in my garage, I'm probably taking care of 99% of anything that could go wrong with bugs. I could do the same thing with neem oil on the organic. I mean, there's a lot of options. That sometimes is overwhelming. Honestly, for me, choosing what we carry for our staff, for customers, we try to tidy our pharmacy down as much as we can. We continue to evaluate every year. We don't need that anymore. This does that too, and try to simplify things. But ultimately, it's going to be your choice. What are you comfortable with in the yard? Systemic, chemical, natural. We got options for all three.
Excellent. And you did mention in a few times about the dormant spray or the wort oil, like getting ahead of things. Is that too late to do now? Or are we still capable of?
Well, and it's not too late. And honestly, this is one I think I've showed at 4 classes out of 7 already this year. But this is it right here. Horticultural oil, organic, unlisted, liquid cop, natural copper. There's not organic. But if I mix these two together, I've got bug, I got disease. And it's not just a dormant spray, quote unquote. These are both products. Read the labels. But if I read the labels, it would tell me right on there, I could use that anytime during the growing season as long as it's not 90 degrees. How many days was it 90 degrees in Western Washington last year? 5, 10. So if I'm going to be safe, I avoid mid-July to mid-September. 10 months of the year, I could use those 2 products to take care of a lot of issues, including as a dormant spray. So you can still do it. Never ever spray anything in flower. So I'm going to keep if it's neem oil, the most organic thing in the world, the most systemic thing, I still do not want to spray flower. So if I'm missed my opportunity, my peaches started to bloom, whatever it is, just wait a couple weeks. We have petal drop. The bees have done their thing. The blooms are down. Now go ahead and apply it. It's not going to matter at that point. Okay. So read the label. It'll tell you a lot of that. There's some plants we have to be careful. Make sure the foliage is all the way out and it's ready to go. Then we can apply it. But it's not the end of the world if you didn't get to it here already this winter. Excuse me. I haven't seen anything, pop into bloom yet in the fruit world. We're getting close. But you should still be able to get most of that stuff done here, like today or next week.
You have time, but not that much time.
There you go. There you go.
So a lot of these products you've been talking about, I know we talk about this a lot, but they have, I mean, you can use them from season to season. So if you don't use them all in one shot, you can still, I mean, they last and you get your value out of it, right?
Well, and again, I don't want to know what your garage or your cupboard or your storage shack or wherever you use, but we don't want liquids to freeze. It changes the chemistry a lot of times, and we don't want the heat. So as long as you're not storing them where it's going to get 100 degrees in the summer and you're not putting it outside somewhere behind the house on the ground where it's going to freeze in the winter, they're not going to lose effectiveness.
So without going into a huge, long discussion about this, there were some questions about, we're talking about targeting bad bugs, but how does this affect the good bugs in your yard and how do you protect them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's honestly the dilemma with me as a gardener and with a lot of the classes I go on to listen to and things as well. Again, that's why I keep saying avoid spraying in flower. I'm more worried about the bees than anything, and I'm guessing that's what this person's asking about. It doesn't matter if I use the safest thing in the world. If I walk out and spray my rose and spray the flowers down and they got bees buzzing around and I coat them with neem oil, they're done. It doesn't matter if it's chemical, natural, systemic, any of the above. I need to keep it off the insects. It's going to be really hard. The ladybug is probably the other one that's got a soft spot with me, and I'm not going to be able to find them all. If I coat my ladybug with neem oil, it's not going to turn out so well for that ladybug. But that's why I say get this on earlier. Try to get it before the bug population has gone up. Look at your plants really carefully before you spray, and do the best you can. I mean, I think that's all we can do as kind of homeowner gardeners, stewards of our little piece of the pie, as they say. Is try to do the right thing. If I see bees out buzzing around, all right, let me do it early in the morning when the bees aren't out as much, late in the evening when they're not out as much. I mean, there's a lot of safe products. We don't sell neonics and some of the stuff that gets bad press around. If I do it at the right time, it goes back to that timing thing. It will probably help my cause quite a bit.
It's good to know. I think we're all trying to do our part to protect, all the good things in our yard, but you also don't want to let the bad things.
Want the bad ones to take over.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah. So we had some questions about leaf hoppers, specifically on berries, but also on dahlias and some other things. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Well, again, I would have a number of different options for leaf hoppers. I'll stay. Let's just start with the systemic is systemic. You're going to get anything with that. So I'm just going to avoid using that word the rest of the class. No more talk about systemics. So if you've got options, something like 8, again, that does such a broad spectrum of stuff. If I do that, again, probably once or twice or 3 times at 10, 14-day intervals, I'm going to win against most of these common bugs. If I go the natural route, lots of options around. I mean, if you're physically seeing the insect, again, if I coat anything with neem oil, if I got the Captain Jacks is something I always have in my garage with the spinosad that does most larvae of bugs. So again, if I get it early, get them before that population builds up, you will win. I think again, and probably with those in particular, the hoppers, they want to move around a little bit. So get them out early. Don't wait to go out there and try to do this at noon or 1 or 2. They may be bouncing around and moving from plant to plant at that point. We do it early in the day and get good coverage. Do it the right way. You will win with really a lot of the products we've talked about today.
Good to know. You keep going back to that 8. It's good. It makes me feel a little bit more.
Again, I've had 8 in my garage. I don't use it a lot. I use it around my house, to be honest with you. I think it's a great deterrent for ants and some other things as well. I grew organic in my own yard. It's just my own choice. Doesn't mean you have to. But for a homeowner, a gardener, if you're going to have one thing, you know, in there and you're not as concerned about being strictly organic, you know, 8 to me is the answer. And that's why Bonide made it years ago, because it's just a no-brainer.
Well, I feel like 8 is kind of that lifeline in the midst of like all of this sea of information, that's, you know, like you mentioned, just a good product for most things, you know, at least a kind of a good place to start. Okay, last question. So lace leaf on azaleas that got brought up.
Oh, lace bug.
Yeah, lace bugs.
Okay. And actually, I'll apologize because I got into my slideshow and was like, I should have put a lace bug picture on that, because again, if we look at the last 3 years in particular, I could not tell you how many hundreds of people have brought in a rhodie or an azalea with lace bug on it. That's a really tough one, because I think most of the time when you've seen it, you're like, holy smokes, what happened to my azalea? I got little green leaves on top. Everything else is off color, looks variegated almost, because the lace bugs have been on there for a season or two. You know, again, I'm not going to use the S word again. You know, that's always an option. But if you want to do the right thing and do it natural, it's the Captain Jacks is the one thing. I've done a lot of reading on this, because this is something for our customers I think has been a huge issue right in our local area here. Spinosad is a great way to go. Neem oil is very effective as well. If we were going to go natural again, organic, those would be my first 2 choices. The neem oil would coat. Again, when I'm spraying neem oil, like the horticultural oil, I got top, I got bottom, I'm choking off oxygen. You'll get the larva, the adults, all of it. The spinosad or spinosad, some people call it, and Captain Jacks, you know, that again is a natural thing that makes me sick to my stomach if I'm a bug. So if I get it at the right time and I spray that on there, larva ingest that bacteria, the spinosad makes them sick, don't reproduce, and we win that way too. The hardest thing with this one in particular, you know, I've probably said it 8 times already about covering your plant entirely. You have got to get under the leaves, and that is really hard on an azalea. I'll tell you right now, looking at mine, it's really hard to get total 100% coverage. So, I mean, I'm really talking about getting a pump sprayer that really miss and really getting into the center of that thing and trying to do all you can to cover the entire plant. Because if we're not going to use systemic, we have to get the leaves covered in contact with all these little guys. And if you look underneath of either one of those plants, you're going to see those black dots all over the foliage. That's going to be the telltale sign we've got the lace bug on there, probably from the last year. Okay, it's April, it's warming up. I'm going to win. You know, let's get this going now. If you had them last year, I will tell you right now, I'd come straight down here and get a bottle of neem oil and get that plant sprayed here before it goes into bloom this spring. That hopefully will protect what's left. You're going to see everything else that got infected last year probably drop off this summer because it's tired. And then we let them bloom. We get the new growth out and then immediately get that sprayed as well. Now we break the cycle and we can start to get our plant back.
Good to know. So there's still a few questions rolling in, and it's kind of, you know, what we talked about before we started answering questions. It's just such a broad topic, you know, that there's going to be tons of questions, and it's a lot to soak in, like we mentioned. So email us with, you know, some of your additional questions, especially specific things that are going on. Even better yet, come down and talk to us, because it's always nice, like Trevor said, it's fun to see the samples and see what's going on. You'll get a better diagnosis and then ultimately a better solution to attack whatever's going on. But use this video. We record it like we always talk about. It's up on our YouTube channel. Use it as a resource so you can go back and kind of, you know, revisit some of the information that maybe was too much to soak in today. And also, like Trevor mentioned, some of those college websites like Washington State University. I think what you mentioned, Michigan, was another trustworthy one.
In our little northwest corner, Washington State and Oregon State are top notch. Midwest, it's Michigan State is also one that I look at a little bit as well.
Yeah, excellent. And, you know, like we've mentioned before, Trevor's not the only expert we have on staff. We have a wonderful team of people that have, like Trevor, used years to gain all of this information that thankfully we can all tap into, that's stored up in their heads. So come down and, you know, stump the experts. I always enjoy that game. I don't know if Trevor enjoys it, but
I do.
Right.
Come down and teach me something. We'll learn together.
Right.
There you go.
So we appreciate you joining us. Come down, visit with us, get some sunshine, hopefully, and take advantage of the sales too. It's always a nice bonus from these classes. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks for another set of classes that Trevor's going to do. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Enjoy the day, everybody. Thanks for joining us.